virtual world. We got a theme going on here. Okay, some of the key take-home points. So if you got to go, or if you take a little nap during this, I want you just to appreciate that there are 4 things you can take away with this. Is that your brain is completely able and capable of adapting and changing. Setting yourself up for success. That's kind of my big segment of just what you can do to adapt, like actual changes. Appreciate the postural control of kind of piggybacking what Tim said, is our bodies are very powerful, very sensitive entities that we can tap into with just everyday things, and that's what we're going to encourage. I'm a big fan of ice cream, so my relationship of trying to get this to stick in people's brains is talking a lot about ice cream. And as we go through all these changes in the world, in your bodies, in any life events that may be occurring, it's to accept the change and to embrace it. So we'll end on a hopefully high positive note there. All right, so if we can just appreciate the definition of adaptation. There's absolutely no individual or species in this year of 2020 that hasn't had to alter or adapt some changes in their life. I would argue that my dog or other domestic animals may have be able to look back on 2020 and actually use the word awesome, right? People are home more, they get a little bit more attention. So again, the appreciation of adaptation is that it's going to happen. And many, many years ago, a Greek philosopher figured this out, right? That the only constant in life is change. So if we look at some synonyms to adapt, we have change, modify, adjust. And when you live with a vestibular condition, you are all very resilient and very knowledgeable about this process. So if we can appreciate that, when I use the term virtual world as it relates in this discussion, I'm referring to a computer-based or online type of community that we're living in. And we all know a computer is a machine composed of hardwire and softwire components. The computer receives data through input on instructions that it receives. It processes it, and then it shoots it back out to do the tasks that you're wanting to do on the computer. And our brains work exactly the same way. Jeff and I were talking earlier in the little switch over that technology is incredible. It gives us a lot of opportunity. It can help us connect. It can enhance our knowledge. But with everything that's not taken into consideration with moderation, computers can also create some alterations with brain connectivity. It makes us not be able, or it may give us headaches. It could potentially reduce our understanding of privacy. Our attention spans might learn to adapt in a different way because we're multitasking, or we're so reliant on getting information so quickly that maybe our patience start to change, our wires of the brain. And it can be a time sink. So just like a computer, if there are too many systems running or any kind of glitches in the system, we get to a point where we need to possibly turn it off, right? I've had that several times. That scenario earlier, again, like I said, was not a planned switch over for technology to have a glitch, but it kind of goes to my point that the brain is the same way. So if you're running around and utilizing your brain to its full potential, but you're not supporting it with any reboot type of techniques or strategies or habits, then your brain may cause some error signals like dizzy, wonky, any word under the sun that just doesn't feel right. So when it comes to the appreciation of neuroplasticity, so tons of research has gone into the brain of understanding that the wires, the nerves within our bodies are like road maps, and the brain is just one big road map. It forms new connections, it weeds out old ones that we're not using anymore. There are billions of pathways or roads that light up every time you think, you feel, and you do something. Habits are the roads in our brain that light up most often. So these are our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a specific task, or feel a specific emotion, we are strengthening that road in our brain. It becomes very easy for your brain to take a certain pathway, and the brain often likes to take the easiest pathway. Say we learn a new task, we think about something differently, we choose a different emotion, we carve out a new road in our brain. So if you keep traveling that road, the brain begins to use this pathway more and it strengthens it. The old pathway gets used less and it weakens. Again, the good news is we all have the ability to change and rewire. So with repeated and directed attention to your desired change, you can rewire your brain. So the appreciation of learning a new skill, right? If you're learning a new skill, it takes time. It takes minutes that turn into hours, and really to become expert, I don't know the stats, but it takes several hours, years to say that you are a savant in some type of skill. Learning a new skill, so a study found that it had 4 groups. So there is a type of learning called implicit learning. And that's unintentional, or if someone's not aware that they are learning something. And then you have explicit learning, which is intentional learning, like sitting down and trying to learn a new language, listening to audio tapes, practicing. So a study found that they had 4 groups. They had one group that was explicit learning with sleep, and then they had another group with explicit learning without sleep. They had implicit learning with sleep, and the 4th group, implicit learning without sleep. And they found that the implicit, so when you're not aware of learning, both groups had significant outcomes of learning that skill. Minimal change, though, came from the explicit learning without good sleep. And so when I say good sleep in the study, it referred to the non-rapid eye movement, or NREM sleep. And that's when our heart rate and our breathing rates are much slower. Our energy is most conserved during that time. And it restores different enzymes in our body, just like rebooting a computer. So just a quick review of the wires in our brain that help us with spatial orientation, keeping objects that we're looking at in focus, and helping us with general balance. Again, your brain uses your eyes, your ears, and your body. This system, or these systems, are highly connected with your autonomic nervous system. So this is your stress system, and that's where breathing, temperature, swallowing, heart rate, digestion, your consciousness, so how sleepy or awake you are, it is all interconnected. All of these roads are connected together. So Dr. Beatrice, back in 1883, first described the appreciation that the inner ear of pigeons connected to their eyes. And so by stimulating the organ, their vestibular organ in these pigeons, an eye movement would become associated with that stimulation. And that eye movement is what medical professionals use today to diagnose vestibular and or brain conditions. We call it nystagmus. So he and a bunch of others over the years started to recognize that there's an importance of not only the vestibular system, but optic, somatosensory, cortical, and spinal influences on the compensation process when the otolith, or the vestibular organ, was altered. So the overall mechanisms of recovery after a vestibular lesion are called vestibular adaptation, substitution, and compensatory strategies. That's what the theory of all of our physical therapy exercises are based on, is this compensation type of strategy. And these exercises adjust the eyes and the ears connecting, it adjusts the neck and the eyes connecting, and it helps that pathway of the brain start to rewire and start to regain a pathway that's most efficient and, again, gets the brain functioning. So terms to describe vestibular injuries, although vestibular testing, so MRIs, vestibular function testing like the caloric testing, even though all of those types of tests may not be significantly obvious, meaning you could be normal, quote unquote, after all of these tests, your brain still, these wires still have possibly not compensated. And so in the medical world, we use terms like well compensated, poorly compensated, and then we also have a word called decompensation. So they've found that upon insult of the vestibular system, no matter what that is, a tumor, a neuritis where inflammation may affect the ear, during that acute phase, your brain is going to rely on your body's cues. That's why we lie down a lot. We don't want to move. It's because we have a lot of connection of where our body is in space through our bodies. During the chronic stages though, so chronic is anything after that acute phase, maybe in the terms of weeks or months at this point, your body, or excuse me, your brain is going to utilize your visual cues. So then when it comes to visual cues, we have two different types. We have central and we have peripheral. And so when you're being chased by a tiger, for example, we go into a central or tunneling type of mode. But when we stop and enjoy our surroundings, if we're outside and we look around, we're engaging that peripheral system. And they have found that the stronger cues or the more powerful cues come from your periphery system. So decompensation. So this is what I wanted to highlight, is that during this time of adapting and alterations to our daily lifestyle, decompensation can happen for those that have a vestibular condition. And this is exactly what some of you may experience when you were first starting off, not being fully compensated after a vestibular start of a vestibular condition, is that overactivity leads to fatigue. So if you push it too much, the brain isn't compensating yet or properly, and it starts to give error signals. You get dizzy. It's not pleasant. But again, like Tim mentioned, is that provoking a little bit of dizziness helps the brain try to figure things out. It's trying to create and kind of rewire those road pathways so that if a road that you're trying to get home on isn't there one day after work, you got to figure out a new way to get home. So this process of decompensation does not mean that you have a new vestibular insult. In fact, it's the absolute opposite, is that your balance system is just as strong as it ever was, but periods of inactivity, some medications, maybe you get the flu, or you exhaust yourself not sleeping, or you go have a fantastic day and you just exert yourself a little bit more, is that you could go into a decompensated type of stage. So appreciating that is kind of leading up to this is, number one, we've learned that implicit learning, so when you're not aware of learning and you're getting good sleep, your brain is able to rewire most effectively, meaning the most significant change can happen when you're doing things without your awareness and you're able to sleep. So my next segment here is setting yourself up. The biggest thing I want to acknowledge is that so a lot of times patients say that they have setbacks. You know, I did this and this happened, and it becomes a negative dialogue in their head that they got dizzy or they got fatigued or whatnot. And they say it's a setback. And I really encourage that dialogue in their head not to look at it that way, is that it's all a learning process. And so that dialogue, right, if we're thinking it, we believe it. And so when you have a nice day or you push yourself a little bit more and you wake up the next day and you just feel a little off, you know, give your brain a lot of credit that it did a lot and it may need to recharge that day, just like your computer. Some suggestions are to set a schedule. So setting yourself up, setting your brain up for that neurological connectivity is just setting up some sort of consistency. I like to use a 60 every 60 type of concept. I will explain that here in just a minute. But when you go to sleep around the same time, you wake up at the same time, when you're eating consistent meals, hydrating yourself, and moving, you know, at this, you know, you can move at different paces, but when you are moving throughout the day, your brain's going to get used to that, rely on it. Again, strengthen those somatosensory cues. And then highlighting some sort of milestone celebration or just something to look forward to, right? Even if it's one thing you look forward to each day, each week, each month, you know, one thing a year, you're always kind of setting that little carrot to look forward to and have those endorphins and the positive reinforcement for your brain. Setting yourself up. So in the appreciation of change is that weather will always change. So what I mean by that point is that if you're set up to be prepared for weather changes, then you are going to be able to get outside or continue to do the things that you love to do if you're prepared. So one constant is that weather will change. And if you live in an area with rain, I encourage you to find an indoor activity or join some sort of class online or get some rain gear so that you can be prepared to continue that movement that you're looking to do. Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. So this brilliant man who decided to go out in an electric storm with a conductive kite brought us electricity, but I think he was pretty prepared for that. But my point is let's just kind of make our brains more equipped to better adapt to situations. And then designing your home as a safe and happy place. And I'm going to tap on a few specifics here in just a minute. So the 60 every 60 concept is that every 60 minutes, taking 60 seconds to do these few things. And this is going to tap into that internal wiring of your brain. So the first little part here on the left hand of the screen is called square breathing. The concept of that is breathing in for 4 seconds, holding that breath for 4 seconds, releasing for 4 seconds, and then holding that release for 4 seconds. And while you're taking in those breaths, that repetitious breath, you're also visualizing a square being drawn or whatever works for you in that moment. And if 4 is not a preferred number, then whatever rhythmic pattern of breathing that you can do, I would highly recommend. Getting up and moving, I would suggest in this hour is actually physically getting out of your chair. So if anyone needs to do that, please go right ahead. During that time, when you take that breath, I encourage you to close your eyes. Let your vision system take a little relaxation, right? By closing your eyes, you are giving different direction to your brain to start listening to your balance system and listening to your body. And most importantly is to tell your brain, good job. So that little word of encouragement, you know, even when you're feeling a little wonky or anything under the sun, your brain is working really hard for you. So just to give it a little tap on the head, gentle tap on the head and tell it, good job, you can see how powerful that might be. All right, so postural control. That implicit idea of learning is the fact of body position makes a difference of the wires that are going to fire in your brain all day long. So having good posture is a very challenging thing to do all day long. So if you can consider that, thinking of your head as an ice cream scoop, like a scoop of ice cream is your head, and then your body is the cone. Or if you can appreciate that a huge golf ball can sit on a tee, because if you just kind of find that alignment that feels right, that little sweet spot, you're going to actually provide your brain with a lot of wires that are going to give it information of where it is in space. So if we can appreciate the vestibular system and those, again, as a review, the vestibular system has 5 pieces to it. It has 2 sacs that tell the brain if you're moving forward, backward, up, down, and then you have 3 canals that detect rotation or movement of the head. So the crystals, or those otolith crystals that live inside of the sacs, really appreciate where gravity is. So when we move our head or we sit in certain positions during the day, the brain is going to start to get a sense of where we are based on gravity. And we can't get rid of gravity. It's kind of with us, so got to make friends with it. So the position of your spine matters. The more load that you're putting on your ice cream, right? If you're losing ice cream, you're going to be super sad about it. So if we can appreciate that, again, getting the neck in a more neutral position when we're doing things we do during the day is going to allow the brain to adapt and to strengthen in that regard. And you can see on this slide that you're putting a lot of strain and a lot more pressure on the nerves and the joints that might lead to more maladaptive type of patterns in the somatosensory system. So again, just to visualize, your head is a nice scoop of your favorite ice cream and your body is the cone. The crystals inside of your inner ear, we just want to get those in better alignment. So that's the type of postural control I'm suggesting you look out for. I'll have this up by hopefully the end of the weekend, but I do have a handout of workstation considerations, specifically to what chairs, what type of monitors, and possibly some lights or some altercations of your environment that you can find. I've linked some of these to Amazon, our local store here in Seattle, and some suggestions on just how to incorporate this into your specific home. But the key take-home points from that handout are to change your position often. So again, there's no fix on adaptations helping. These adaptations are intended to help you. They're not going to fix any solution that we're looking for. But I would encourage you that if you haven't had your eyes checked in a while, to go get that done. You see how important the vision system is. So if your prescription is a little out to date, and or, as Tim mentioned with the progressive lenses, if they're not set up to the type of position that your head is in most often, you're going to create these little deficits and the brain's going to get confused, right? The more lenses the eyes have to jump through and coordinate, it's a lot more effort that the brain has to deal with. Blue light, if we talk about that real quick, why monitors, and they talk a lot about blue light, it's the similar frequency to sunlight. So it stimulates our brain and it lowers our body's natural hormone of melatonin. You can buy melatonin over the counter to help you fall asleep, but your body should be able to naturally produce that. And so the whole theory of science and no screen time before bed, it's because your body's getting stimulated, and add on a very exciting or not so exciting type of program that you're watching, emotionally that might affect you and that might make it more difficult to fall asleep. So there are glasses that have the blue blocker lenses in it, FL41 lenses, it's more of a rose-colored tint. Those can help reduce kind of noxious frequencies for those that have light sensitivities. And then the lighting in your home. So again, it's on the handout, and you can email me personally if you'd like, but one suggestion about your setup is reducing a tunneling type of vision. So if your monitor is bright and the lighting around you is dark, your brain is going to be focused on that bright light, and it's not going to create that peripheral sense we're looking for. So I would encourage you to find some side table lamps that have a softer light, and maybe turning down the brightness on your screen, and or changing the font size on your computer so you're not straining. When you go to stand up, so, you know, figure out what ratio works for you, but I would encourage you to get up more often and maybe change your position if you're on a workspace or computer to go stand with that. And you can try different balance stances while you're working on the computer. Just kind of appreciate your shifting of your weight and pay attention to working on a little balance while you're doing something else. Maybe when you're washing your hands, try going into semi-tandem stance, you're near a counter, and just kind of practice that wiring to get your brain feeling a little bit more confident with balance when you get up and move around. And as Tim alluded to, the foot is really powerful, so that tripod stance, when you're even sitting, is to really get your feet grounded and to really appreciate what it feels like through your feet as you do certain tasks. All right, kind of just talked about the tunneling, but another picture here kind of describing or showing head position and maybe some altercations of your position of your technological device. And then going back to the concept that your periphery system is stronger than your central system for vision is when you're up and moving around, I would encourage you to look around a bit more. That does make people more unstable when they have a vestibular condition, but again, create a safe environment, understand your body's, you know, if you're on flat surface on a walk, or if you're on some grass, looking around may feel different. So just make your brain feel safe and appreciate that postural tension that might be happening during that head movement, and start to relax and take a deep breath, recognizing that when you get a little bit more tense, you lose that flexibility, right? You lose that adaptation to change of head movement. And so just pay attention to that a little bit more, but I encourage you to do it. All right, I've included a couple self-meditation, self-compassion, and some sleep videos that I've found very helpful. But what I want to close with is just telling your brain good job, right? If you wake up and you get a little dizzy, or later in the day you get a little dizzy, it should not be a frustrating process, right? It's your brain literally needs some rebooting time and needs some love just to be able to do what it needs to do all day. And so if we can practice those positive reinforcements of thinking, that dialogue inside of your head, that instead of getting frustrated with maybe the stress that you're dealing with in your life, is to take a step back, breathe it in, and just appreciate, your brain is going to rewire in a more positive way. And so acceptance, you know, this is having tools to manage and cope with change. When we go back to the behaviors that we may instill in ourselves and get used to, is that if we take a look at those and maybe look at ways that we can think about them differently, or just start to initiate small little changes each day, it's going to make a big difference in the big picture and help our resilience and our ability to adapt with change. So you can think, so most people are pretty independent with keeping their body moving or to adapt their ways in their home. But I would suggest that if you need a little boost, like the Geek Squad for your computer, there are tons of resources out there. And I'm sure Cheryl and a lot of other folks in the Dizzy group have some resources or things that they're doing. So I encourage everyone to collaborate. I'm going to have a Boost Your Brain's Balance class starting in November. So if you are interested in this, it's going to be a recorded session. So you can join me live on Wednesdays from 11 to 12, starting November 11th, or I can send you the link to join at a later time, and then it'll be a 4-week series, and it'll be half learning about something and then half doing exercise. So about a 45-minute session. But go ahead and just email me, info@vestibularspecialist.com, or if you want to register online starting November 1st, it'll be at vestibularspecialist.com. And I thank you for joining me. So in my life as a vestibular physical therapist, I was actually finding that I was doing a lot of telehealth prior to COVID actually happening. I didn't know really what telehealth was until, the last 2 years, but now it's a big part of medical care. And I was seeing a lot of patients up in Alaska and all over the state of Washington who we would collaborate and communicate about things that they could do because they didn't have a specialist near them. So I started doing, telehealth is really just a medium of a computer doing physical therapy. So physical therapy comes first. It's actually just through a computer versus hands-on. And a lot of therapists are doing this type of adapting to care. So you have a lot of resources is my point on this. If you want any specifics, go ahead and contact me and I would be happy to work with you or find you someone to work with. And then Cheryl might tap on this, but November 14th, we're hosting another Boost Your Brain Balance. So the concept of Boost Your Brain's Balance is intended to be a fundraiser for the Seattle Dizzy Group and for Vestibular Disorders Association. So I'm hosting these Boost Your Brain's Balance. I'm inviting different practitioners speaking on their profession or their specialty to help boost your brain's balance, whether it's just vestibular system or just daily lifestyle. So on November 14th, I have 2 colleagues who are going to talk on the theme rest and relaxation. All of these videos will be available on vestibularspecialist.com after the event. It's just that on the day, and when you go to see the videos after this date, it's a $1 donation to get the video that goes right back to Seattle Dizzy Group. But the day of the event is free.